This is a crime that has reached into the heart of that community. The Department of Justice has opened a hate crime investigation into this shooting incident. The FBI, ATF, U.S. Marshals Service, Civil Rights Division, and the U.S. Attorney's Office are working closely with our state and local partners, and we stand ready to offer every resource, every means, and every tool that we possess.
Attorney General Loretta Lynch announced today the Justice Department has opened a hate crimes investigation into the Charleston Massacre. At a prayer vigil today at Morris Brown AME Church, Reverend Dr. Charles Watkins had another characterization for the atrocity.
We gather to offer our condolences and to pray with and for the families of the friends, colleagues, and family members killed in a senseless, tragic episode of domestic terrorism.
This is, of course, not the first time we've seen an act of domestic terrorism against an African-American house of worship. As described by The Root, the terrorist actions that occurred last night at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston are also a continuation of attacks upon black churches that have occurred throughout the history of this nation. The story of the modern civil rights movement cannot be told without discussing the attacks on black houses of worship. Joining me now, civil rights activist Kevin Alexander Gray. He's co-editor of Killing Trayvon's. Good to have you here.
Good to be here, and sorry under these circumstances.
Well, what do you think about that term that a lot of people are using, which strikes me as a fairly accurate one given the circumstances, given the reporting we've heard that he literally said to someone, "I'm letting you go so that you will tell people what happened," that this was domestic terrorism?
Well, I mean, sometimes the word terrorism is overused, and maybe we ought to just call a crime, that he committed murder, and we ought to charge him for murder. This idea that we're going to put somebody in jail for 100 years and add on an extra 50 years, you know, just have one standard, charge him for murder. We don't need to be expanding this idea of a war on terrorism. No question, it was a heinous act. But the idea that we use this term terrorism so freely, unless we're going to talk about the structures of white supremacy in this country that keep people unstable, keep people movable, keep people as second-class citizens, then I just think that the term is just overused at this point in time.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that, because what I have seen from so many people is this frustration, this anger that, you know, in the case of Boston, for instance, we use the term terrorism there. These are people that are trying to terrorize people that committed murder. That term is freely used. When Lindsey Graham is asked today on The View about what is the motivation here, take a listen to what Lindsey Graham had to say.
I can't explain this. I don't know what would make a young man at 21 get so sick and twisted to kill 9 people in a church. This is beyond my understanding.
Do you think that it's a hate crime? Do you feel like it's a hate crime, or do you think it's more mentally disturbed?
Probably both. One probably precludes the other. There are real people out there who are organized to kill people in religion and based on race. This guy's just whacked out. But it's 2015. There are people out there looking for Christians to kill them.
Can you talk about that some more?
So this is a mean time we live in.
I mean, it just does seem that we have now, again, this is an alleged, this man is alleged of committing this crime. We have reporting that indicates, but as each bit indicates, the picture of the white supremacist states, of the flags of the white supremacist states, the Confederate States of America license plate.
Look, I'm from South Carolina. This state is the ideological home of white supremacy in this country. On our State House grounds, we have memorials to Confederate heroes. We have a flag of the Confederacy that flies on the State House grounds. We have streets, roads, bridges, schools, buildings named after.
We're on Calhoun Street.
We're on Calhoun Street. They build the statue of Calhoun so high so that the freed slaves wouldn't tear it down. The tourism industry in this city is based on slavery. That young man grew up in a state that reveres its Confederate history. It reveres the fact that the first shots of the Civil War were fired from this city. It reveres the fact that the Citadel right across town was built to crush slave rebellions. That young man was born and lived in a county that's the most Republican, most conservative county in the state, that if you go to places like Swansea, Pelion, Gaston, that you'll see Confederate flags. They believe that that the Confederate flag is a flag of the white man's country. This is not new. Now, if we want to talk about white supremacy and the ideology of white supremacy is terrorism and how it has kept people down for generations and generations and locked them out of progress, sure, we can apply the term terrorism. But the way it's used now, Muslims are terrorists. Latino people, when you mention them, they're illegal immigrants. Right. Blacks are thugs. And most of the time, when it comes to young white men or old white men who are troubled, they're mentally ill. Right. The term is so overused, and it's just as meaningless as the term racism in this in the context of America.
Kevin Alexander Gray, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you.
Still ahead tonight, the incredible history of Mother Emanuel Church, which you got a taste of just at the top of the show, the scene of last night's massacre. We'll be right back.
All of us who live on this earth has a responsibility to leave some evidence that we live here and that we serve here and that we work here. Senator Pinckney, in his years of service in the House and the Senate, as a pastor and as a community leader and as a friend, leaves much evidence.